It was one of those mornings when nothing felt right. The rain hadn't stopped since dawn, and the cold wind kept sneaking through the cracks of the old apartment window. Maria Alvarez, 7 months pregnant, stood in front of the small mirror by her door, fixing her hair before work. Her belly was heavy, her back ached constantly, but she still forced a smile. She had to, rent was due, and every dollar counted. She worked at Grayson's Auto Supplies, a warehouse-style store run by Mr. Doug Harris, a man whose words always had a sting hidden behind his fake smile. He liked to act polite when customers were around, but everyone in the staff room knew the truth. Doug didn't like people who weren't like him, especially not a brown-skinned woman with an accent and a baby on the way. Maria had been working there for almost 2 years. She came early, stayed late, and handled the customers no one else wanted to deal with. Her coworkers liked her, most of them anyway. She learned to ignore the subtle comments Doug made during staff meetings. "You people sure know how to breed," he once joked when she mentioned her upcoming maternity leave. Everyone laughed awkwardly, pretending not to hear. That morning she could already sense something was wrong when she walked in. Doug was in his office, packing around with a scowl, his phone pressed to his ear. The minute he saw her, he hung up and called out, "Maria, come in here for a second." Her heart sank. Inside the office, the smell of coffee mixed with the faint scent of cigarette smoke. Doug leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against a folder with her name on it. "Maria," he started, his voice coated with fake sympathy, "you know we've been having some performance issues lately." She frowned. "Performance issues, sir? I haven't missed a day except for my doctor's appointments, and those were approved." He sighed dramatically. "It's not just about attendance. You've been slower lately, taking more breaks, needing help with the heavier boxes. This is a business, Maria. I can't afford to carry dead weight." She blinked, shocked. "I'm 7 months pregnant, Mr. Harris. You said I could take lighter duties until my leave." Doug shrugged. "That was before corporate started watching labor efficiency. They're breathing down my neck and I've got to make some cuts. Unfortunately, it's nothing personal." Nothing personal. The words burned in her chest. She could see it in his eyes. It was personal. He'd been looking for an excuse ever since she told him she was expecting. "So you're firing me?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. He smirked. "Effective immediately. You can collect your last paycheck at the end of the day. And, congratulations on the baby." Maria's lips quivered as she stood there, gripping her belly instinctively. She wanted to cry, scream, do something, but all she could manage was a whisper. "You're heartless." Doug leaned back, pretending to be amused. "Careful, Maria, don't make this ugly. I could always say you were insubordinate." That was it. She walked out of his office, her face pale and her hands shaking. Her coworkers looked at her in confusion as she gathered her things. Jenny, her closest friend there, hurried over. "What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." Maria forced a broken smile. "I just lost my job." Jenny's eyes widened. "He can't do that. You're pregnant, for God's sake." But Doug's office door slammed shut, and everyone suddenly found reasons to look busy. No one wanted to be the next target. When Maria stepped outside into the cold rain, her tears mixed with the drops running down her cheeks. She stood by the bus stop, clutching her coat tighter. It wasn't just about the money, it was the humiliation, the injustice, the feeling of being tossed aside like trash. That night when she got home, her brother was sitting on the couch. Corporal Luis Alvarez, U.S. Marine Corps sniper, had come home on leave just a week earlier. The moment he saw her swollen eyes, he knew something was wrong. "Hey, what happened, sis?" he asked, standing up. His deep voice carried that quiet authority he developed after years in the service. Maria hesitated, not wanting to upset him. "It's nothing, Louis, just a bad day at work." He frowned. "Bad day? You've been crying." She tried to avoid his gaze, but he caught her hand and sat her down gently. "Tell me what happened." When she finally did, every word, every insult, every look of satisfaction on Doug's face. Louis sat there in silence. His jaw tightened and his knuckles turned white as he clenched his fists. "He fired you," he said, his tone low and cold. "Yes," said I was slow, said it wasn't personal. Louis leaned back, his eyes narrowing. "That bastard thinks he can just do that." Maria sighed. "Please don't do anything stupid. I just need to find another job. I'll be fine." But Louis didn't respond. His mind was already working, replaying every detail, every word. He'd seen men like Doug before, arrogant, entitled, cruel when they thought no one could touch them. Later that night, while Maria slept, Louis sat in the dim light of the living room, scrolling through his sister's phone. He found a photo of Doug on the company's website, a smug, middle-aged man with slick hair and a forced smile. He memorized the face instantly. He didn't know exactly what he was going to do yet, but one thing was clear in his mind. This wasn't over. The next morning, Maria woke up to the smell of coffee and bacon. For a second, she thought everything was normal, that she still had a job, that her world hadn't just collapsed the day before. But then she saw the envelope on the kitchen table, the one Doug had handed her with her final paycheck. And just like that, the memory came flooding back. Louis was at the stove, his broad shoulders tense under his gray t-shirt. He didn't say a word at first, just slid a plate of food toward her. She sat down quietly, staring at him, knowing that look on his face. It was the same one he had before deployment, focused, distant, dangerous. "You didn't sleep much, huh?" she asked softly. He shook his head, didn't feel like it. "Louis, I meant what I said yesterday. Don't get involved. People like Doug, he'll just twist things. I can't afford any more trouble." Louis's eyes met hers, steady and unflinching. "He fired you for being pregnant, Maria. That's not trouble. That's wrong. You think I'm gonna sit here and let some racist piece of trash get away with humiliating my sister?" She sighed. "Please just let it go. I'll figure it out." But Louis didn't answer. He finished his coffee in silence, grabbed his jacket and left the apartment. Doug Harris was having a great morning. He had his coffee, his usual donut, and a sense of satisfaction. He always enjoyed cleaning house, as he liked to call it. He told himself it was business, not bias, but deep down he knew better. He liked having control, liked reminding certain people of their place. He was standing in front of the mirror in his office, adjusting his tie when the doorbell chimed. The shop wasn't open yet, so he frowned and walked toward the front. Outside stood a tall, well-built man in a dark jacket and jeans. Clean cut, calm face, but with eyes that looked like they'd seen more than anyone should. "Can I help you?" Doug asked, half annoyed. The man extended a hand. "Morning, you're Mr. Harris." "Yeah, who's asking?" "Name, Luis Alvarez. I believe you know my sister, Maria." Doug's smile froze. "Ah, yes, Maria, good worker. Real shame she couldn't keep up." Louis nodded slowly, his jaw tight. "You fired a pregnant woman, sir, 7 months along." Doug scoffed. "Look, I don't know what she told you, but she wasn't doing her job. Business is business." Louis tilted his head. "Business," he repeated. "Right." He stepped closer, close enough for Doug to notice the faint military tattoos on his forearm. "You know, when I was deployed, I met a lot of men who hid behind excuses. They'd say orders are orders while they did things that would haunt them forever. You remind me of them." Doug's face hardened. "You threatening me, Marine?" Louis's voice was calm, too calm. "Not yet." Doug's hand twitched, but Louis didn't move. He just looked around the office, his gaze landing on the staff board. Maria's name had already been wiped off. "Erase someone that quick," Louis said quietly. "Guess you've had practice." Doug crossed his arms. "Look, I don't have to explain myself to you. She can file for unemployment or whatever. That's not my problem." Louis smiled faintly, the kind of smile that wasn't really a smile. "See, that's where you're wrong. It is your problem." Then he turned and left. No yelling, no scene, no violence. just a quiet promise in his eyes. That night, Doug stayed late to finish inventory. The store was empty except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. Around 9 p.m., he stepped outside for a smoke, locking the front door behind him. The parking lot was nearly empty, just his truck and a few distant streetlights flickering in the rain. As he lit his cigarette, a sharp crack echoed across the lot. The sound was faint, like a branch snapping. He froze, glancing around, his nerves on edge. The wind carried whispers through the trees, and then he saw it, a red dot dancing lazily across his chest. He dropped his cigarette, heart pounding. What the hell? The red dot slid up to his chin, then disappeared. Doug spun around, scanning the rooftops, the shadows. Nothing, just the steady drizzle and the flicker of a dying streetlight. He rushed to his truck, fumbling for the keys. His hands shook so hard he could barely fit them into the ignition. When he finally started the engine, he peeled out of the lot, tires screeching. From a nearby building, Lewis lowered his scope and exhaled. He hadn't fired a shot, didn't need to. Fear was a weapon of its own. The next morning, Maria found Lewis cleaning his rifle on the kitchen table. She froze in the doorway. "Lewis, what did you do?" He didn't look up. "Nothing illegal." Her voice cracked. "Tell me you didn't." "I didn't touch him," Lewis said evenly. "But he knows now, knows what it's like to feel powerless." She sank into a chair, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't want revenge. I just wanted justice." Lewis finally looked at her, his gaze softening. "Sometimes, Maria, justice doesn't come through laws or courts. Sometimes it comes through fear, the same fear he put in you." She shook her head, whispering, "That's not who you are." He stared down at the rifle for a long moment before disassembling it. "Maybe not, but it's who I have to be." Doug hadn't slept properly in 3 days. Every noise outside his house made him jump. Every flicker of light felt like that red dot again. He'd told himself it was a prank, maybe some kid with a laser pointer or maybe a trick of the light. But deep down, he knew better. That man's eyes, that quiet confidence, he wasn't bluffing. Luis Alvarez. The name alone sent a cold shiver down Doug's spine. He looked him up online the next morning, pretending it was just curiosity. The first thing he found was a news headline from 2 years ago. Marine sniper saves squad from ambush in Afghanistan. Doug had scrolled through the article, his mouth dry. It described how Corporal Luis Alvarez took out 6 insurgents from over half a mile away, protecting his entire unit. There was even a photo, Luis in uniform, calm and steady, rifle slung over his shoulder, eyes focused and fearless. Doug slammed the laptop shut, his hands trembling. What the hell had he gotten himself into? At work, he started keeping the blinds down in his office. He jumped whenever someone knocked on the door. The employees noticed, whispering among themselves. Jenny, who had always disliked him, smirked behind his back. "Looks like karma's got Mr. Harris shaking in his fancy shoes," she said. Doug overheard her once and nearly exploded. But then he stopped himself. What if Alvarez was watching? What if every move he made was being tracked? That night as he drove home, he noticed a dark SUV following him for 3 blocks. His palms began to sweat. He sped up. The SUV sped up. He turned left sharply, and the headlights behind him turned too. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, breathing hard. Finally, he swerved into a gas station and jumped out of his truck. The SUV kept driving, not even slowing down. Doug stood there, heart pounding, realizing it had just been an ordinary car. Still, he stayed in the gas station for almost an hour before driving home. When he finally arrived, his house felt colder than usual. He checked every window, locked every door, even peeked under the bed like a child afraid of monsters. He poured himself a drink, sat on the couch, and turned on the TV. The local news anchor was talking about a protest downtown, something about unfair dismissals and workers' rights, and then he heard it. Former employee Maria Alvarez filed a formal complaint today against Grayson's Auto Supplies, the reporter said. Alvarez, who is 7 months pregnant, claims she was fired unfairly by manager Doug Harris. Doug dropped his glass, watching it shatter on the floor. His phone started buzzing. His boss, Mr. Thompson, was calling. He hesitated, then picked up. "Sir, I can explain." "You'd better," Thompson snapped. "We're getting flooded with calls. You fired a pregnant woman. Do you have any idea what kind of PR nightmare this is?" Doug stammered. It wasn't personal, sir. She wasn't performing." "Save it. Corporate HR wants to review your entire file. You'd better hope this doesn't get worse." The call ended abruptly, leaving Doug in stunned silence. He poured another drink, his mind spinning. This was Maria. She'd gone public. She was fighting back. But she wasn't the one who scared him, it was her brother. Louis. Across town, Louis sat quietly in his truck, watching the glow from Doug's living room window. He wasn't wearing his uniform now, but he still carried that marine stillness, controlled breathing, patient eyes. He'd already done his homework. He knew Doug lived alone. He knew his habits, his favorite bar, even the way he always parked 2 inches from the curb. Louis didn't plan to kill him, no. That would be too easy. He wanted Doug to feel small, to taste the fear his sister had felt walking out of that building, pregnant, humiliated, and crying in the rain. He made one phone call to an old friend from the Corps who now worked in security. "Need a favor," he said simply. "Anonymous tip. A guy named Doug Harris is stockpiling illegal firearms at his workplace." The friend didn't ask questions. He just said, "Got it." By the next morning, 2 police cruisers pulled up in front of Grayson's Auto Supplies. The staff watched as officers entered Doug's office and started searching. Someone had slipped a photo to the police, boxes of unregistered handguns that Doug had been buying under the table for a friend who ran a pawn shop. Doug's face turned white as they led him out for questioning. Jenny filmed the whole thing on her phone, whispering, "That's what you get." The story hit social media before noon. Within hours, Doug Harris was trending online for all the wrong reasons. Comments poured in, people calling him a racist, a bully, a coward. Louis watched from his phone, a quiet smile playing on his lips. He didn't need a sniper rifle anymore. Public shame was its own kind of bullet. But while Louis thought it was over, it was. Doug got out of police custody that evening, furious, humiliated, and burning with rage. The cops hadn't found enough to charge him, but they'd made him look like a criminal. He knew someone had set him up, and there was only one name that made sense. Maria Alvarez. He drove straight to her apartment complex that night, his headlights cutting through the mist. His fists gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. "I'll make her regret this," he muttered through clenched teeth. He didn't notice the shadow waiting across the street, engine off, watching him through a rifle scope. Louis had been expecting him. The night air was heavy with tension. The street outside Maria's apartment was quiet, only the hum of distant traffic breaking the silence. Louis sat in his parked truck across the road, eyes on the front gate. He wasn't holding a rifle now, just his phone. He made a decision earlier that evening, one that had taken all his discipline as a Marine to accept. He wasn't going to let anger define him. He'd seen what revenge did to men in the field. It ate them alive long after the fighting stopped. So instead of waiting in the dark, he made calls. He contacted a local journalist, the same one who had reported Maria's story the day before. He'd sent over documents, emails, and even a short video from a coworker who had recorded Doug making racist remarks during a staff meeting. Everything was ready. Now it was about to unfold. Inside the apartment, Maria sat on the couch, her hands resting on her belly, trying to calm herself. She hadn't slept much, but she felt stronger now. The complaint she filed had been picked up by several workers' rights groups, and people online were already sharing her story. She'd gone from being a silent victim to someone whose voice mattered. When a car stopped outside and she recognized Doug's truck, fear hit her chest like a hammer. "Louis," she whispered, standing up and peeking through the blinds. Doug stepped out of his vehicle, his expression dark and unsteady. He looked exhausted, half-mad, like a man whose world was falling apart. He started toward her door. Before he could even reach the steps, another car pulled in behind him, a news van, camera lights already turning on. Doug froze. Two reporters stepped out, followed by Jenny, her old coworker, holding a folder. She looked straight at him and said, "You wanted to talk about Maria, right? Let's do it on record." His face drained of color. What is this?" Louis walked up behind him, calm and composed. "It's called accountability," he said quietly. "You like firing people for no reason. Now you get to explain it to the public." Doug turned, his anger rising. "You set me up. You think you can ruin me." Louis didn't flinch. "You did that yourself." The cameras rolled as Doug tried to argue, his words stumbling and defensive. Every excuse he made only dug the hole deeper. When the reporter asked about the racist comments and the firing of a pregnant employee, his reaction was all the confirmation anyone needed. The footage aired that same night. By morning, Doug Harris's career was over. Corporate issued an official statement announcing his termination, along with a public apology to Maria Alvarez. A lawsuit followed soon after, one that would ensure she and her child were cared for. Weeks passed. The air around the apartment felt lighter now. Maria's baby was due any day, and her brother still stayed close, making sure she had everything she needed. One afternoon, she found him sitting by the window, looking out at the street, lost in thought. "You did the right thing, you know," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "I wanted to do it the wrong way at first." She nodded. "I know, but I'm glad you didn't. You taught me something, Louis." He looked at her curiously. "What's that?" "That strength doesn't always mean fighting. Sometimes it means knowing when to stop." Louis chuckled. "You sound like Dad." She laughed, her hand on her belly. "Maybe I do, but he'd be proud of you." He looked down, emotion flickering in his eyes. "I hope so." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the city lights began to glow. Somewhere across town, Doug Harris was packing up his empty office, his name already removed from the door. He'd become a cautionary tale, a reminder that cruelty has a way of coming back around. And Maria, sitting beside her brother, felt peace for the first time in months. She didn't need revenge. She had her dignity back, her family, and soon her child. Louis placed a hand on her shoulder. "You'll be fine now," he said quietly. "I already am," she replied. Outside, the wind carried away the last traces of that dark chapter. And for the first time in a long while, Maria Alvarez felt free.